Thank you, Allison. And thank you everyone for coming in person and remotely. Let's see here. All right, hopefully I'm loud enough if I stand here with the microphone. Awesome. All right, so today we're going to be talking about early stage growth, specifically under the lens of a direct-to-consumer business, but a lot of the core philosophies and ideas can be applied to pretty much any business. But as we get more and more specific sort of through this talk, it'll become more and more specific towards direct-to-consumer businesses. So kick it off, just to introduce ourselves. My name is Matt Spettel. I'm the co-founder and CEO of CoPilot. I went to Carnegie Mellon for my undergrad degree back in 2019, where I studied electrical and computer engineering. But throughout my time at Carnegie Mellon, I was super involved in all of the different entrepreneurship programs going on. So if you have questions about McGinnis or innovation fellows, scholars, Schwartz fellows, Venture Bridge, any of these programs that I'm sure you hear about all the time and are on all these signs around here, feel free to ask me because we probably did them at some point. And I'm joined today by our awesome COO at CoPilot, John LaGue, who did Y Combinator with his own company in 2019, has grown a bunch of different stuff over the years. And we were lucky enough to steal him about 2.5 years ago as pretty much employee number one. So he'll be doing a lot of talking today because he's the real expert on this area. I just take credit for everything he does, but I'll be kicking us off. So first, just context of why you should maybe listen to us a little bit. We've grown a lot over the last 3 years or so. You can see on this graph here, VB is for Venture Bridge because that's where I stole this slide from. But we started out like every other company with $0 of revenue, 0 employees, 0 everything. And over the last 3 years, we've grown about 20% month over month on average to about $4 million a year in recurring revenue today. And so, we are by no means the end all be all of how to grow a consumer company to 100 million a year, but this early stage growth trajectory is something that we've obsessed over and sort of become relative experts of over the last 3 years. So hopefully can share some of the insights we learned along this graph with you guys today. Just some groundwork before I hand it off to John to dig into sort of the first part of this is talking about what you actually need to grow at the highest level. So I'm sure you've heard of this term product market fit before. It's very mysterious, very elusive, but I've just broken it down into 2 core components. One is to have product market fit, you need to have a differentiated solution to a painful problem. And I would say probably 90% of startup talks focus on this component of product market fit. Probably most of the talks here, most of the stories you hear is all about how do we do customer discovery? How do we find the problem? How do we build solutions? How do we iterate, etc.? Oftentimes not looked at until after you have that, but equally as important is the second piece of you need to be able to actually access the users who will pay you to have that specific problem solved. And so, today it should be no surprise that, the Schwartz Center has a million resources for this left thing, but only a few for this right. And so we're going to be trying to focus here and answer this question I get asked all the time of, how do I get users? How do I grow? How do I, sort of go through these different phases? And just to sort of put a famous quote to what it means to actually put these things together, Mark Andreessen from, Andreessen Horowitz says, the customers are buying your product just as fast as you can make it, or usage is growing just as fast as you can add more servers. Money from customers is piling up in your company checking account. You're hiring sales and customer support staff as fast as you can. And so we've had a few moments like this over the last 3 years. It's definitely not a every day you wake up and feel like this type thing, but this kind of feeling is what we're trying to help every company achieve with some of these tips. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to John to talk about sort of the first segment, which is the hackiest, sketchiest part of the first 1 to 100 users you'll get.
Thank you, Matt. Right, so the first 1, 10, 100 customers that you get, I just want to preface all of this also as well that there's going to not be any magic pill that I give you all for how to get a bunch of customers. And that's especially true of the very first ones. It's going to be a pretty manual process for the most part, for most companies, for most startups. It's pretty manual. It's a pretty manual sales process, and that's actually really useful for you. So overall, to get those first 10, 20, 30 customers, you want to do things that don't scale, which is something you hear pretty often in the startup world. And it's very true. So use your networks, reach out to friends and family, get them to be customers right away, get people on your LinkedIn network or here at the Schwartz Center, get fellow entrepreneurs to sign up for your service. Fellow startup people are typically some of the best early adopters. So use your networks early on. It'll be pretty manual, like I said, and it'll probably take you a lot longer than you expect it will. It took us 9 months just to get to 100 clients, and that's when we were focusing pretty much all of our attention on getting those 100 clients. So it will take a lot longer than you think, but with all of that manual sales, you'll get a lot of face time with your customers, which is really, really valuable to learn more about their problem and how you can better solve their problem. So some examples of doing things that don't scale, and this is stuff that we applied to CoPilot. This is just a little portion of some of the things we tried to find growth. The first one, we set up a table on a street corner and just talked to people about CoPilot. That actually worked surprisingly well. We also just sort of forced our friends and family to buy it. Revenue is revenue. It's okay. Anyone paying you is better than no one paying you. So just get anyone you know to give you money, and that's great. We gave away free Apple Watches in order to have people sign up for the service. We manually scraped the MIT and Harvard alumni database, and we sent all of those people handwritten letters asking them to sign up. We called every local gym and we pitched them on remote training, which is what CoPilot is all about, if you're not familiar. And we went in person to these gyms if necessary, and we actually built a couple gyms their own training apps, which is a really intensive manual process just to get like a handful of customers, but it was totally worth it early on. We also just DM'd people on LinkedIn and different social media platforms, asking them to join. We reached out to a bunch of local press. So reached out to probably about 100 different press organizations just via email and LinkedIn ourselves, and eventually got the local NPR of Pittsburgh to write about us, as well as the Pittsburgh Business Times. So just a bunch of manual stuff there. And we've also went around putting out cheap flyers on people's cars, putting out door hangers on houses. We went to Reddit and we found posts where people were complaining about working out or looking for help, and we just DM'd those people. We also went to Shady Side here and found wealthy looking houses and just put these fancy looking boxes outside their house with a little handwritten note telling them about CoPilot and giving them a little discount. And all of these, this is just a small subset of all the different things we tried, but none of these things are super scalable, but you can definitely get a handful of customers from each of them. And a lot of these things kind of fall under that bracket of do things, ask for forgiveness, not permission. So a lot of these things like dropping off boxes at people's houses, a lot of people were kind of upset with that, but we still got, I think, 1 or 2 people to sign up from it too. So it's okay to do things that you might think are a little weird or strange, especially early on.
We didn't say that, for the record.
Yeah, we didn't say that. Yeah. No. Obviously, don't do anything illegal, but do things that you wouldn't think of right away. And so with all of that sort of doing things that don't scale, you get to talk to your users often, and you should talk to your users often. The first few sales should be as manual as possible so you can get that face time, and that will allow you to deeply understand the problems of your users. And especially, this is a very key point, you can learn what other solutions they have tried in the past to solve their problem. And that will allow you to kind of differentiate your solution and find a way that you can fit in the market. One final point in this talking to users is I think you should all read the Mom Test. It's what I recommend to pretty much anyone starting a company. It's a very short book, and it just gives you a nice little framework and some tools for asking questions to potential customers or existing customers to get real feedback, so that you could even ask your mom questions and she'll give you honest feedback as opposed to just being nice. So you're going to do things that don't scale for those first, 10, 100 clients, get as many people as you can just using the service, talking to them. But once you want to start scaling that up, you're going to need some sort of framework to work by and some sort of channel to acquire customers reliably. So now we're going to be talking a little bit more about how you find that channel for growth. So what is a growth channel? A channel is what connects your product with potential customers. At the highest level, a channel is a place where you can get impressions of your product and attempt to convince people to buy it. So a channel is just a place where you get access to customers, and that's all it is. And we're going to give you a little bit of a framework for how to find a channel that works for you and your company. So how do you find a channel that works for you? Pretty much my entire method for doing this, I stole from a guy named Gabriel Weinberg, who's the founder of DuckDuckGo, the search engine. And he wrote a book called Traction, where he outlines this framework called the bullseye method. It's pretty straightforward, and that's what we're going to be going over today. And it's what I've used in not only CoPilot, but other startups to find a lot of success. And in that book, he lists 19 different types of channels that you can go and test. And you'll go out and test each of these channels to find which one works best for you and your company. So, like I said, he has 19 different channels in the book. I'm not going to go into a crazy amount of detail with each of these. If you have a question about any one of them, just note it down and we can go over it at the end. But the bold ones that you see here are ones that we will be diving a little bit more into later on. But I'll quickly run through them all just to touch on them. So the first one is blogs. Second one is publicity. Third is unconventional PR, which is like publicity stunts, search engine marketing, which is like Google ads, social and display ads, that's like Facebook and Instagram ads, offline ads encompasses a lot of stuff like sending mailers to people's house or billboards, search engine optimization, content marketing, email marketing, viral marketing, product-led growth, B2B to C, sales, affiliates, existing platforms, which a lot of things fall under as well, trade shows, offline events, speaking engagements, which kind of like what we're doing right now. So if
sign up for CoPilot?
sign up for CoPilot. Small little plug. And then finally, community building. So all of these are different types of channels, and there's lots of subgroups within each of these channels that you can test out to see which one works best for your company. And one important note is just looking at that list. If you're starting a company or if you work at a company right now, you're probably removing some of those from your potential list right away. You're like, that's not for us. That's not going to work for us. And you should not do that. So don't dismiss any single channel as off limits for you and your business. Typically, the underutilized channels can be some of the best hidden gems. Because if you're working in primarily an online industry where most of your competitors are selling through Facebook ads or something, then maybe offline ads or offline events could be an underutilized channel, and you could really differentiate yourself in that channel. So don't dismiss any channel. All right, so now that we have the 19 channels, how do we go about trying to figure out which one is right for us? So we're going to go through and kind of test each channel out. And when we're testing a channel, we want to have 3 questions in our mind to kind of compare each channel and each test. And that is, what is the cost to acquire a customer? How many potential customers are available in that channel? And are these the type of customers you want from that channel? And we'll go into each of these in a little bit more detail. So what is the cost to acquire a customer? This is pretty straightforward. How much money do you have to put into the channel to get one customer out of it? If you're not spending any money on a channel, you can also think of it as how much time and effort is required to go into that channel to get one customer out. So pretty straightforward. You've probably heard of this before. Second question, how many customers are available? So the earlier on in your company's life, the less important this question will be because you're just trying to get as many customers as you can. But it is a useful question for planning future tests and comparing a specific channel against other channels. It'll also matter when trying to determine if a channel is actually scalable in the long run. And the third question is, are these the type of customers you want? So this is a really, really important question. 4 sort of sub-questions to that is, does this channel have people who really need your product? Is the problem you solve for those people in that channel a painful problem? Do these people refer others to your product after becoming customers? And would these people be very disappointed if you stopped offering your product or service? So all of those questions relate back to what Matt mentioned at the beginning, which is that product market fit question. So if it's a painful problem for these people in this channel, or if they're talking about your product to others when they sign up or buy your product, that's a really good sign that you might have some potential product market fit within that channel. So all three of these questions are really important for evaluating the different channels as you're testing them. But how do you actually go about testing them? So it's pretty straightforward. Step one is you make a big spreadsheet. So make an Excel of all your ideas. So you're going to take a different tab for each channel. There's 19 different tabs, and then go through and list out all your ideas that you could potentially have for that channel. Just a free-form brainstorming session. Don't dismiss any ideas as off limits. Steal from other startups, steal from us the ideas we posted earlier. Take whatever ideas you can find online and just put them in for how you can grow within that specific channel. List out as many ideas as you can for each channel. Then you'll go through the spreadsheet and you might create 3 more columns to compare each of those ideas based on the 3 questions we talked about earlier. So how much does it cost to acquire a customer from this channel? How many potential customers are available in that channel? And then are these the type of customers that you want? And obviously you won't have real data on any of those ideas yet. So it'll be a little bit of guesswork at the earliest stage until you actually test some of those ideas and get hard data. And then you can use that to compare against other tests. But to start out, you'll kind of just be estimating based on what you think it'll take. So once you have all your ideas and you have the different questions and estimates there, then you just simply target the ideas that are easiest to do and have the most potential upside or the most potential customers in that channel. And you do nothing else but focus in on those probably 2 or 3 tests and do as much as you can to see those tests all the way through. So test, and then once you have results from that test, evaluate all your tests based on the 3 questions, comparing them on how much does it cost to acquire that customer, how many customers are potentially available in that channel, and then are those the type of customers you want? How do you know when you've actually tested a channel? So a single test, these are just very general sort of claims. It could be very different for you and your business and service, but generally these are relatively true, but they're not anything set in stone. It's kind of very much just pulled out of air, but a single test probably shouldn't take more than 1 month to perform. Honestly, most tests probably should be done within a week. If you're very early on, you can probably do some tests in a day. And it probably shouldn't cost more than $1,000. A lot of tests will be completely free to you. A lot of them will be much less expensive. Some might be a little bit more expensive depending on the type of company you're in and what you're trying to do. But if you're just trying to get an idea of if this channel will potentially work for you, then you shouldn't be spending more than $1,000 on that. Also, sometimes a channel may require multiple tests. For example, us and Facebook ads, we tried them many, many times. And every time that we tried them, they kind of didn't work out well. And so we would set them to the side and we would go back and test other ideas, other channels. And then we'd come back and say, you know what, I don't think we fully tested this idea or channel. We didn't do it right. Let's go test it again. And then we finally found success in Facebook. So it may require multiple tests, but don't feel attached to any single channel or test. If we hadn't set aside those Facebook tests, then we would have missed out on several other channels that were actually really, really valuable to us. So don't feel married to any single channel, but it's okay to do multiple tests within that channel or that idea. And for example, at CoPilot, we performed about 55 channel tests before discovering any one that really worked well for us. So it can take more than this. It can take hundreds of tests. It can take, 1 test and get it right, but it probably will take a lot of different testing. So it's okay if it doesn't work out right away. Just keep trying more stuff, keep talking to your users and figuring out what is going to be a good channel for you. All right, and so now that you have hopefully a growth channel that is working for you, I'll pass it back to Matt to talk about scaling that channel.
Awesome. So yeah, this is where it's going to get a little more specific, a little more tactical into you found this one channel. Now what? Right now, how do we take that channel and turn it into something that resembles a high growth, highly venture backable, very attractive business? So something to keep in mind is that most companies, probably 90+%, get the vast majority of their scale from just one channel. So there's, I remember, in the early days, I think there was a lot of confusion for us around, oh, there's all these channels that you can go through. We have to figure them all out. This is going to take a long time. Whenever you do a case study of, pick your favorite company and really dig into, watch those founder interviews, watch those podcasts, listen to those podcasts, right? And you'll hear like that common trend of like, yeah, like especially in the early days, like 95% of it was from X, right? And so this is all about that X for your company. So you're going to just be taking that channel and scaling it up, and optimize and scale are the keywords here, right? So before there was lots of wide experimentation, very general, lots of guessing, lots of hand wave. This is where you start to have to really crack the whip and be a good scientist and really hold yourself to a high level of correctness and optimization. But just a footnote at the bottom here of, as with anything in startups, it's nearly impossible to know if you found the true local maximum for your company. So if you find, let's say that offline mailer ads are just really working well for you, and you're like, this is awesome, I'm going to dedicate more energy into this, maybe doing, I don't know, like Facebook ads is actually 10 times better for your business. But since you maybe didn't test that or test that well enough, you didn't know that. So it's important to just keep some subroutine going in the background to be testing additional channels even while you're optimizing this one that you found, because there is the possibility that you find something that's an order of magnitude better. So I'll be going kind of quickly through this more specific stuff, but please, you'll have this deck afterwards to reference it and ask questions at the end. But an important concept to understand as we dig in here is the funnel, which you've probably heard people talk about before: the acquisition funnel, the growth funnel, etc. And basically, it's called a funnel because you take the very top of the funnel is very wide. You see 100,000 people, let's say, view some sort of impression about our company or our brand on one of these channels. And then the purpose of the funnel is funneling them down, so at the end, they are loving our product forever. So you go from views to probably some kind of website, to probably some kind of creating an account, to some kind of purchasing, to some kind of true retention and stickiness and love of the product. And then there's all these mechanisms on the bottom that you use in marketing to grab all the people who went to the landing page but didn't create an account. You can retarget those people and try to get them to create an account, or you can use drip emails to get people who create an account to purchase something. And I'm sure your inboxes are full of the marketing of companies trying to do these things to you, but they do them because they work. And lastly, if someone purchases but then doesn't retain, you can use reactivation campaigns to get them to come back. So it's not just this linear, simple thing. There's lots of in and out. There's lots of up and down, all over the place, right? But just understanding that this is the machine, the input-output machine here that we're trying to optimize in every way possible. And just connecting it to the last two sections that John went over, the top of the funnel is synonymous with these channels that John was discussing. So all of these different channels, all 19 types or whatever, are all just funneling into the funnel. Right. So this is all connected together. So now double clicking on probably one of the most popular and widespread channels, which is advertising, and specifically here, kind of digital advertising. There's, at the very least, you should try digital advertising. It can be expensive. It might not work, but it's a channel that almost everyone tries. And so we wanted to just cover it in a little bit more detail in this section. So 3 parts of any ad: copy, creative, and audience. Copy is what the text says, creative is any video or image that's attached to it, and audience is who are you actually serving that ad to. And you can see there's a bunch of different ways in which you can define an audience. You can target attributes like or demographic attributes, for example, of I want to target men who are between the ages of 30 and 35 and live in Pennsylvania. Like, you can be that specific. You can also use something called a lookalike audience, which is what LAL is short for, which you essentially say, here's this list of 1,000 people who signed up for my newsletter. I want to find more people like these people. And then Facebook can use their, scary, creepy big data ML models to determine what people are like those 1,000 people and serve ads to them. And so you end up with this giant matrix of, on one axis, copy, on one axis, creative, and on one axis, audience. And it's your job as a scientist and a marketer to test different cells within this matrix to find which ones are the most optimal. And so generally you want to experiment across one axis at a time. So if you're going to be testing audience, you don't want to also be like if you're testing two ads against each other, you don't want to change audience and creative at the same time, for example. You would want to keep creative and copy constant and then potentially test two audiences to understand which of those does better for your business. But just it's important to understand how to structure these ads when you're going into these tests. So it's not just, oh yeah, I'll throw together an ad and see if it works. Like make sure you're thinking about it systemically with these kind of three categories. And then just some bullet points of tips and tricks, honestly, to help you through this. Always align these three things for a specific test that you're doing. So example for us would be a picture of a businessman, whatever that means, struggling to fit, and then the copy of struggling to fit your workout into a busy day. And then you target, high earning men in a metropolitan area or something like that, right? And that's an example of aligning all three of those to give it the highest likelihood of success. Videos are great, but only generally if they're higher quality, sort of more polished looking videos. If the video appears sort of unprofessional or put together sketchily, probably is better to stick with stills in our experience. But if you have good videos, or if your brand does well with like more informal media, like if someone taking a vlogging and talking about your product is like on brand for your company, then that could obviously work well as a video, even though it's not professional, right? So just again, use your best judgment, but stills do work. I already talked about sort of the lookalike audiences, and you can also use pixel audiences, which is just grabbing data from your website to automatically detect anyone going on your website and then serve them ads to say, hey, you saw my website earlier, you want to come back and check this out, or here's this other thing you can do. Again, just getting into the weeds of all the different ways you can target people. And then lastly, my big tip is using ads with an objective. So the default on Facebook, which is really annoying, is running ads for clicks. And there's, I'll cynically say that Facebook is going to basically click your ad without actually doing anything on your website so that they can convince you that it's working more than it is. In reality, it might be third parties with bot farms across the world clicking your ads to sort of, ruin your economics. But the moral of the story is if you run ads, run them with a real objective that you can measure, which would be something like subscriptions, account creations. If you can measure clicks on your side of it and clicks to a specific button on your landing page, for example, it could be just much better than clicks to the general ad itself. Shifting gears to another channel that's become very popular recently and is the channel that was the single channel that worked really well in the early days for CoPilot, so we're especially sort of knowledgeable about it, is influencers. So just quickly going through some bullet points for working with influencers. You want to clearly define what you want them to do. They are in general a very hard group to work with in practice. So you want to be very specific about what you want them to do, what you need them to record, what you want them to say, sort of how you want them to even use your product. You need to all spell that out. Second point is you want to ensure that the influencers have a true connection with your product. I'm sure you've all been on YouTube recently and you see someone saying talking about whatever the video is about, and then, record scratch. Okay, guys, let me tell you about today's sponsored NordVPN, right? And you're like, what? Like, how does NordVPN have anything to do with this, right? And you just skip. Okay, gonna continue watching my video, right? To avoid that sensation or minimize it, you want to find influencers and influencer content that truly aligns with your brand. For example, some of our best videos are influencer makes a video called, I worked out for 400 days. Here's what happened, right? And then that entire video is about what happened, but then a specific segment of that video is specifically talking about how CoPilot helped them in that journey of working out. And so, knowing your own business, you can think like, okay, a video like blank would be a really good sort of place to put a sponsorship read for my product. Just some other random stuff. Expect 50% of influencer deals to fall through. John can tell you this one very well. Again, they are a hard group to work with. don't have very high expectations. So always overbook what you think you'll need. And then just as we, sort of tying it back into what we just discussed, treating influencers just like an audience with social media ads. So it's still your job to match the copy of what that influencer is saying and the creative and the visuals and the content of that video to that specific audience that they're speaking to, right? For us, if we're doing a deal with a fitness influencer, probably what they're saying to their very fitnessy audience is different than if we're doing like one of our most successful ones was an ADHD influencer, right? There's going to be very different pitching points, different language, different vibe, but they both worked. So just like an ad. And you can reuse influencer content across all different channels if you get the rights for that in the agreement. So even if you're doing billboards, physical mailers, ads, press events, like, if you have the rights, again, asterisk, like you can use those across other channels to sort of amplify your other efforts as well. An important thing for like any science experiment is obviously measuring your results. And so very quickly, just going over some of the words or acronyms mostly that you hear thrown around by marketing people so you can understand a bit of what they're saying. So at the highest level, as John mentioned, there's this concept of cost to acquire a customer, which people always call CAC. And then the other super high level number is lifetime value, which is generally measured in how much revenue, or more specifically, how much gross margin or like how much gross revenue you get from a customer. And then for each step, there's sort of lingo and terms that you can measure. So just going through them really quickly so you have them down. And again, just download the slide deck and reference these. But the cost to get in front of somebody is a cost for an impression, which is normally measured in CPM. Why they measure it per 1,000 impressions, don't ask me. I don't know why, but that's the industry standard. So it's cost per 1,000 impressions. The cost per click divided by the click-through rate. That's not divided. The cost per click and the click-through rate are both ways of measuring that first interaction with the ad. CPC, cost per click. Bounce rate / time spent on page for when they actually make it to your website. Like how long do they stay on your page? Which pages do they go to? Bounce rate is what percentage of people just leave the website without interacting with anything. Drop off at every step of any sort of funnel or onboarding quiz you have. Purchase and conversion rate, retention rate, etc. Net promoter score is like how likely people are to refer your product to friends. So long story short, there's a bunch of different metrics and a bunch of different acronyms that you can use to measure success at every different part of this whole process. And depending on what you're trying to optimize for your business, you'll want to pick one of these. So if you're noticing there's a big drop off between when people click your ad and when people create an account, then you could just measure the specific like sort of percentage change between those two steps as your success criteria, which might be one of these, or it might be a custom sort of thing you define. And people always ask sort of like, when am I ready to do this kind of optimization? Obviously, if you have thousands of clients paying you, or at least 1,000 clients paying you, you probably have a bit more budget to work with than sort of the $1,000 that John was, mentioning in the last section. And so for these kinds of tests, the budget will be higher. General rule of thumb is you want to spend probably about 5 times what your cost to acquire a customer is, or at least your best guess of it, before concluding that something works or doesn't. So for example, for easy math, let's say it costs us $100 to acquire a customer, and you're spending on this, ad or whatever, it's at $300. You're like, oh man, I spent $300. That's 3 times as much as what I want. I would recommend you go to, in this case, at least $500 or 5 times the cost to acquire a customer before you really conclude, okay, this isn't working, or okay, it only got me 1 new subscriber. It's probably not worth it, right? And if you don't know your CAC, you can use just some multiple of your price. So if you have a $10 product, you could use $100 as like sort of a benchmarking number. And then as John mentioned earlier, like the speed and pacing of these experiments gets much more structured as you start to scale. So when you reach this scale, you'll probably have a small team. You'll probably be sort of managing the pipeline of tests and sort of the measurements and decisions around them. So this is just an example of like, sort of what we roughly did during the stage and, continue to do basically today. Monday, design the experiment, pick the hypothesis. Monday to Thursday is build the actual experiment, any technical support we need for it, any new landing pages, any new ads, etc. Thursday into Friday is testing that experiment and making sure that it actually works and functions and measures as we'd expect. Friday into the weekend is you actually launch the experiment and start measuring it. And then then you just kind of let it run for a week. And then you come back a week later and you get to answer that question or you get to either confirm or deny your hypothesis. And since there's this sort of week time of just sitting around and letting it run, if you want to be really efficient, you can do essentially this every single week. So you're always designing an experiment and you're always running an experiment at any given point in time. And that lets you move really, really, really fast. So generally for startups, the more cycles or the more experiments, the more hypotheses you can test, the likelihood of you becoming successful increases at least linearly with that. So the faster you can run experiments accurately, the higher likelihood you have of success, in other words. And with that, I'll hand it off sort of this last section to John again for another thing we get asked a lot about, which is hiring people for growth in the early stages.
Thank you. Right. So very early on, when you're faced with 19 different channels that you want to test and you don't have any customers and you want a bunch of customers, it's very natural to want to try and find someone or some group to come help you get those early customers. Very, very natural, especially if you're a CMU grad like Matt and you don't like talking to people. Then yeah, it could feel uncomfortable testing all these different channels. But something that I mentioned early on is there is no magic pill. So no one will magically solve growth for you or your business. It's your job as a founder to figure it out. And it's Dave might, yeah. I would say the only exception is if you hire me and make me COO, then maybe, but even it's a team effort, and it's really you as the founder or the business leader to lead that effort. It's not some business intern to come do some social media for you to hopefully get you some clients. That won't work. And with that, agencies should probably be avoided early on. They will promise to grow your business, but they will likely lack the ownership and strategy, and most importantly, the speed that is needed to solve early growth. And a lot of agencies are actually very niche to one specific part of the marketing world. So you might be testing something with that agency, and after a week, you learn, oh, this channel isn't actually going to work for us. This isn't what we want to do, but you've signed a 3-month contract with them. Now you're kind of stuck with them. So you don't want to be stuck with an agency, and they typically don't have the ownership that you want very early on. If you are going to hire someone very early on, it's best to hire generalists who have worked on early stage growth before, and ideally they're probably an ex-founder themselves. So they know exactly what it will take to test different channels or to find growth very early on. And they understand that it'll be that manual process where they'll have to kind of roll up their sleeves and get in and do a lot of the work themselves. So early on, hire generalists. I would say if you've already found a specific channel that is working very well for you, then that is the time where you can probably hire someone who's more specialized. Like, let's say sales, direct sales is the best channel for you and your company. Then maybe you want to go hire someone who's really good at doing sales. And that's okay. They don't need to be a generalist and know all the other channels out there. But that's only if you found a very successful single channel and you want to hire very specifically for that, because you've already proven out the channel yourself as a founder or business leader. And until you reach the 10,000 plus scale, grind, passion, and creativity are way more important than industry specific experience in any specific channel. I know 19 channels. I don't know as much as a lot of people out there about those 19 different channels, but you can find out pretty much everything you need to just by Googling and watching a couple YouTube videos, and then you'll be able to run some tests yourself. You don't need to be some crazy expert in any specific channel to find users early on. But overall, summary of everything we've talked about. First thing, when getting your very first customers, do things that don't scale and talk to your users very often to better understand them. And number two, once you have that first group of users, you can start implementing the Bullseye framework to find a single channel that works best for you and then hyper focus on that single channel. And be a good scientist and constantly run optimization experiments as you scale on that channel to make it better and better until it's completely used up, and then start testing other channels to find a new one that works best for you. And finally, just want to leave you with some resources for further learning. The book I mentioned earlier by Gabriel Weinberg is Traction. You can get it on Amazon. If you don't want to read the book, there's actually 3 Medium articles that he wrote himself that basically cover everything he talks about in the book. So definitely at least read those articles. They're super short and they're very useful. Also, The Mom Test, I mentioned earlier, another great book. It's super short. You can probably find a PDF of it online. It's also available on Amazon, but it's how to get honest feedback from your users or potential users, and is extremely valuable. And finally, connect with us, Matt Spettel and John LaGue on LinkedIn. We're always happy to grow our networks and to answer any questions you have there. But thank you all. And if we have any questions, we can probably start going through those now.
I think you were first.
Yes.
But I think it's like more this, right? With influencers, like how do you identify if you were the right one?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a tough question. We early on almost completely scrapped influencers as a channel because our first test of it wasn't as strong as we'd like it to be. So it definitely is a very valid question. I would say you probably do want to test multiple influencers. You don't want to say, okay, this one influencer is going to be the test. So if you can test multiple people, that will give you a better picture. And then look for any indication that you'll have success. So if you're getting some purchases or subscribers or whatever you're looking for from that influencer, then that could be an indication, okay, we should run a second test with something slightly different to see if it gets us to where we need to go. But
That's a follow-up question.
Yeah.
I know right now there's like platforms, like website, you can go find influencers.
Yeah.
You guys find you guys more specific.
Yeah, I would avoid doing that. They're pretty expensive for the most part. So you can do a lot by just DMing people on Instagram or going to YouTube pages. If you go to their profile and then business, you can get their email and just send them an email. Again, it'll be pretty manual. Like we had to email hundreds of influencers to get people, but yeah, I would not go. We have used platforms like that. Some of them overpromise in terms of the data that they can give you. So just be aware of that. It's not usually worth the price, depending on what you're offering. If you have something free, then sometimes those platforms can be really useful to getting a big volume of influencers. But
And our first influencer was actually someone who John just had been watching for years and was a fan of. And so probably his pitch to that influencer was a little more powerful than the average. And we knew what kind of content and what kind of personality he was. So especially if you're building a product for someone like yourself, that can be an interesting place to go, is like, just genuinely, who do I enjoy consuming the content of? And, you know, I can reach out to them very genuinely and say, like, I love your content, like, can we work together, right? Fundamentally, these are partnership. And so sort of treating them like that, rather than treating it as a, here's a sack of cash, say this please, is the more you can get it feeling like we're working together, we're doing this together, you actually like this product, the better. Yes, what is that?
Did you have to pay your influencers, or were they like natural enthusiasts who were like open to giving you honest feedback? Because I know that some influencers, I listened to in podcasts or Clubhouse, and influencers were saying that they are upset about people sending them unsolicited material and expecting they will mention their product. They were saying this is a serious business and they can get actually expensive. So can you comment on how to connect with them and what is the pricing?
Yeah, so pricing, yes, we do. We pay them. There are a few different models. So you can pay them a flat fee. You can also offer an affiliate basis. So for every purchase you get from their promotion, then you'll pay them some X amount of dollars on top of that. So usually smaller influencers will be open to that, which is probably better for you if you don't have any money up front. So for smaller influencers, that's definitely the way to go. But bigger ones will probably require that upfront payment. It's very unlikely that they'll just talk about you naturally That was a big way people would do it in the past, but it's not as successful today since so many brands just mail stuff to influencers. But you can try that too if it is free and cheap for you to do so. Yeah, it can. Yes. It is, yeah, it is thousands of dollars, depending on the influencer. Like I said, smaller ones, you can get some pretty good deals for a few $100s maybe, or offer the affiliate. So I would start there if you're concerned about price. Something we also did with one of our earliest influencers is we offered a 2-part deal where we said, we're going to do this one thing with you. And if we see success, then we'll do a much bigger one where we pay you a lot of money. And that is actually the one that worked really well for us. So try and find someone who's open to that. Not everyone will be, but if you get a good relationship, then they can be open to that sort of thing too.
Yeah. And we know YouTube, I guess, John, what did you say? Like on YouTube, 100,000 subscribers is probably a 10K-ish video.
Yeah. So it's going to be anywhere from $75 to $125 CPM. So per 1,000 views, expect to pay in the range of $75 to $125 per 1,000 views.
Yeah. So it can get extremely expensive, especially for larger influencers.
Yeah, it can be a lot less. Sometimes you find deals. Sometimes you find really big ones who are like really inexpensive.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, you guys, I think earlier on mentioned pivot from gyms, I think, in your business model. I'm hoping you could talk a little bit more about that. And also maybe more generally about like, what the question cynically, like when you get discouraged or kind of give up on a test or a method of growth that at the later stages, a little more empirical, so a little less emotional and more obvious, but like particularly for the later stages, when you declare victory on, validating the pivot.
Yeah, great one. So, I mean, to quickly answer your question about the gym specifically for us is, this was still in the phase of, on the order of 100 clients or less. So that first, nothing is scaling phase, everything's scrappy. It was me, John, and Gabe, living in an apartment together, eating ramen every day. Like that's the context. And what we're trying to figure out was like, what is the actual modality of these pieces that we built that people are going to want to pay for? And so one of the things we tested was, let's try to sell this as a tool to gyms to help them train people remotely and things like this. And it was a product test, but it was also a growth test because the channel was B2B to C, or we were selling to gyms, and then gyms have access to customers is how you break it down. And for us, what we learned with that channel was it was a slow process to get buy-in from a gym, which is generally normal for like B2B. But then on top of that, each gym provided very little value in terms of users and revenue. And the users who were training through that gym showed significantly lower levels of engagement, retention, success in general than the users we were training directly. And so we saw firsthand, like, wow, this product is a lot better when we're facilitating it ourselves. To answer your question of how do you sort of deal with the ups and downs of testing these channels, like I don't have a magical answer for that. Obviously, like to give you, I guess an anecdotal story of, we were testing, or we were in that 1 to 100 clients, what's going to work, I don't know what's going on phase for just under 2 years, I would say. And during that time, we were constantly iterating the product. We were constantly trying new customers, trying new channels, and these 55 tests were going on continuously that John was running. And like 53 of them or 54 of them were basically complete failures, right? And so we're spending thousands of dollars across all these tests. We're using up all of our time. We're, it's hurting our morale because they're like, oh my God, does anyone even actually want this, right? Like it's tough, right? And that's why it takes a certain kind of person to make it through those early days. And like one thing I always share with people is, 3 days before the video that John was mentioning that came out, that brought us from 100 clients, basically single-handedly to 1,000 clients overnight. We were having a conversation around our table, eating Chipotle, saying, man, we should just totally pivot to this like completely different idea, basically. And like, how about we just do this instead? And then like, so we were like, we had given up on like that core idea. 2 days later, this video comes out, and suddenly the question is, holy crap, we need to raise venture capital money to keep up with this growth. This idea is amazing, right? And that's like the most startup story I have, right? Because that's exactly like, you have no freaking idea if something's good or bad until the market or you align these things, even just by chance, and then it starts to grow, right? So again, this whole concept of the more swings you take at bat, the more likely you are to hit a home run, right? Like you don't actually have to be that good at hitting home runs. You just need to swing the bat 1,000 times, right? Like I can't hit a baseball for my life, but I bet if you let me swing 1,000 times, I probably could, right? That's kind of the mentality. Yes, what's up? Oh, sorry, I think you were first. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. I was wondering what have been the most valuable channels for you, not only in acquisition, but also in terms of getting feedback from customers, keeping them engaged, and I guess general impact to your business, to the product. Sorry, I know that was a confusing question.
You want to take that one?
Sure. So I would say in terms of just general channels, if you're thinking about those 3 questions and kind of you're asking yourself how to compare the channels based on that, then influencers is probably our most successful channel. But we've also seen success across a lot of different channels. At a certain point, the repeatability of a channel becomes a big question though, and influencers is where we've seen a lot of repeatability. But yeah, does that answer your full question, or was there more to it?
Not just in acquisition figures, but also in
Talking to customers, you said?
Yeah, or what have been the most valuable channels to receive feedback that then feeds into product development and strategy more broadly?
Yeah, I would say in that case, like stuff that you do face to face where you can talk to the customer and see them interact with your product or service is the most valuable. Actually seeing how they use it without asking them is going to be really valuable, because people forget things. They focus on something that's not really the main extraction that you want to. I also see that we have some chat questions as well. Okay. But yeah, does that, I would say as much face-to-face channels as you can do to get insights and see people using your product or service.
Yeah. And ideally, I guess I would add to that, like ideally, it's not like friends and family are hard to get genuine, like even with the mom test sort of philosophy, it's with product especially, it's really hard to get quality, unbiased feedback from friends and family. So that like one step past friends and family, like for us, it's like that random person I talked to at the CMU gym over there and somehow tricked them into trying our service for a little bit. Like that person was very valuable in just giving me a general response. Even if their response was they used it once and then didn't use it anymore, obviously that's also a signal that's important to measure. So yeah. Yeah, what's up?
My question is, are there tools to exactly track where this purchase came from a certain influencer or from a certain YouTube channel?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's definitely tools out there. We've built some custom stuff ourselves, so I'm blanking on any like off-the-shelf stuff that you can use, but there's definitely link services where you can give a link to the influencer and the audience clicks on that link, and then you can track those clicks, and then you can track how many people sign up using that link. You can also give them a discount code if you're using like a website like Shopify that has discount codes built in. Then you can just give the influencer, say, hey, say this discount code, and then you can track how many people use that discount code. Is that some of the simplest ways, but we built some custom things to really track all of that too.
Yeah, on a technical level, you can, like in a link, you have URL parameters, which are basically little variables you can set to whatever you want. And so in marketing, you can set the campaign, the content. So like there's all these different standardized ones that you can set, and then you can track like on basic analytics sites, like, even Google Analytics probably will break down like how many people came from this campaign link or whatever. Yeah.
At which stage of the growth did you incorporate, and would you do anything different given what you know?
Yeah, good question. So we incorporated very early, basically before any true growth. Because we were actually applying to Y Combinator at the time. We ended up not getting into Y Combinator for what it's worth, with this business. But we wanted to be incorporated because that was just one of the requirements of Y Combinator. I would say, like, nowadays, I don't think there's that much of an argument for like waiting on incorporating. So Clerky is the service you should have the name of. It's like, I don't know what it is nowadays, but $200 or so to fully incorporate your business as a C Corp, which is what you want for a startup in Delaware, which is what you want. Like, don't incorporate as an LLC in Pennsylvania or something like that. You're going to have to just redo that. There are services that, you know, our lawyer is actually sitting in that conference room over there, so I can't say this too loud, but don't pay a lawyer like thousands of dollars to set up your initial incorporation. Use one of these like very high quality startup services, with Clerky is the name brand one. And that's the one that Y Combinator also recommends to do that initial setup. And you just won't have to you won't lose any sleep at night wondering if it's set up correctly, because they probably incorporate 90% of successful startups. So
because this goes actually against what lawyers are advising.
yeah, I wonder why. It's almost like you have to pay them to do it.
It's like treating like one more founder not to have a lawyer with experience.
I would say we're not lawyers, so take everything we say with a grain of salt. But
yeah,
chances are something will go wrong.
yeah.
So if you have a lawyer who is used to working with startup, they set up the company for contingency. And apparently you know each other well and you get along like very well, but it's not always the case, right? So you are confident that somebody like Clerky sets it up even like for those like borderline burn scenario. Yeah.
So if you're particularly concerned with like, in this particular contingency, I want to make sure I have this particular outcome. Obviously, when you get that specific, I think you would have to go to a lawyer. Like, the general approach at that earliest stage is going to be like, whoever has majority shares in the company is going to have some element of control to add or remove other members, right? And so some people will say, give one co-founder 50.1% and the other one 49.9%, so that you have a tiebreaker in the worst case, right? Other people will say, do it 50-50 so that you have to agree and there can't be one of these fundamental things, right? You know, you'll hear different advice in different ways. Obviously, maybe you and your co-founder, it's more of an 80-20 type thing, right? And so you'll just always be the one in control, and you'll always, like, they could never remove you and you could always remove them, and that's just the way it is. So there are just fundamental setups like that. But if you're particularly like concerned about a specific situation, or, you know, whatever, like, then yeah, I would at least consult a lawyer on that. You would maybe not necessarily have them do the entire thing for you, but have them help you understand what those edge cases are and how you'd want to set that up.
And I don't have specific concern with Spettel. I have just seen startups fall apart and not having this contingency.
Yeah, I will add that, like, when you raise venture capital money, and a much denser set of rules and contingencies is applied to the business, where, like, in the earliest stages, yes, you have articles of incorporation. Yes, you have these basic rules that governs how the business works. But generally, when real, you know, substantial amounts of money are being injected into the business, that's when the lawyers get really heavily involved and start setting up huge amounts of infrastructure for, oh, this investor has this right and this one has this one, and here's how they interact and all these kinds of things. In the early stage, the business is fundamentally not worth anything. And so what you don't want to do is spend like $50,000 on all of that early.
That's why I'm
Yeah.
asking to be incorporated, because I know that some I'm not ready to pay 10,000 lawyers to set it up the right way, but it seems that this is a great way to start.
Yeah, I would, I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I would be fairly I'll say this. Y Combinator, the #1 accelerator in the world, recommends that all of their companies just use Clerky to set up and get started and sort of deal with the more complex issues as the business evolves, right? If the business isn't worth anything, a fight with your co-founder is also not worth anything. So if you can offset some of that setup to when the business starts to become worth something, obviously there are situations where you could get screwed over doing that, right? But generally that's what they advise. So I'll just echo that. Good question.
online questions. So we have two sets,
Cool.
to deal with the influencer. What was the best option for reaching out to an influencer and how did you evaluate?
Yeah, I would say the best option was just, I mean, what worked well for us was just emailing influencers directly. You can, without too much trouble, find influencers' emails or their agent, more often their agent's email, and just send them an email and try and make it as personable as possible. Don't go too lengthy. Don't try and explain everything you do in an email. Be pretty quick, but try and make it personal for that influencer and try and actually entice them with like, hey, we're actually willing to put money behind this as well, and show that you're, you know, legitimate in your partnership and you don't want something for free from them, because they get a lot of requests. But email works best for us. In the past, it has, at least. You can also DM people on Instagram or some platform, and that can actually be surprisingly successful as well. And then what was the second part of that question?
How did you evaluate?
Yeah, so evaluating, just going back to those three questions. What is the cost to acquire a customer in that channel? How many potential customers do you get from that channel? And then are these the type of customers that you want? So that's what we use to evaluate. So if working with one influencer, we don't get a lot of customers and it costs us a lot to get those handful of customers we got from that one influencer, then it's probably not worth it to work with them compared to other tests. But if we work with an influencer and we get a bunch of customers, and for each individual customer, the cost to acquire that customer was very low, then it's probably worth it to work with them. Again, especially if those customers are referring other people to our service or talking about us in an organic way.
Yeah, and I would add, like, before the evaluation, before you do an initial test with an influencer is extremely hard. There's a lot of like companies out there that will pitch you on, oh, you look at an influencer's engagement, or you look at their comment rate, or you look at their view per subscriber, right? Like, what we've honestly found is that what makes an influencer good is much more complex than any of those very surface level metrics. Like, you can look at like demographics, right? I know something we look at, like, if your product is for men and all of their audience is women, like, probably not a good candidate, right? But anything beyond that first, like, very macro level ends up probably becoming less important than, like, honestly, your gut feeling of like, yeah, this person actually, I think, would believe in this product. I like them, they like me. Like, I think this would be a good partnership, right? Yeah.
That genuine test. Are they genuine?
Yeah. Like, I think John just guessing with his gut is more accurate than any sort of like model we could make to evaluate them at the top level. So
Sorry. one more
so ask John. Yeah.
Do you have any specific learning resources on digital marketing you would recommend, or any case studies on early growth companies you found useful?
Yeah, so I would definitely check out the book that I mentioned earlier, but I would also say that there is another YC company called Demand Curve that has a lot of case studies that you can go look at. They're offer, knowledge base that you pay for, and courses about growth, but they also have a lot of free stuff. I would also look at Y Combinator's Startup School on YouTube. They have a lot of really interesting examples and case studies there too.
Awesome. Cool.
So I have a question. So like, just going back to your initial go-to-market plan was to partner with gyms, right? So like,
one of the tests, at least, yeah.
Yes. And then like most businesses, like for example, stuff that I'm trying to build, I want to partner with restaurants, right? And so I'm contemplating between whether to buy back shares of the restaurant that I used to own, or go around convincing restaurants. In my experience, convincing these restaurants, even though it looks like obvious you're adding outright value to them, they just don't get it. Or like the whole iteration cycle of asking them to change something is like very, very problematic. So is there anything that you observed that you did to, you think could help faster acquisition of these type of, like I would say small scale businesses, right? These small gyms, each one is like the acquisition cost is high, but the lifetime value is high.
Yeah. I mean, so not that we have particular experience beyond these initial tests with small medium business, but anecdotally, what I hear from other founders is that exact problem of it's a very fragmented market where there's a very high cost to go after a single business and then a relatively low payout on a per business basis compared to if you go after Microsoft for a year and then you sign a deal with Microsoft, that single deal could prop up the entire existence of your startup, right? Versus if you go after Stacy's gym on the corner of Fifth and whatever, like that's not going to generate enough revenue and will take a relatively high amount of effort to get into. So recently, there's definitely been a resurgence of startups that have been going after small, medium businesses, but using more direct to consumer marketing strategies like Slack, for example, right? Like Slack, most people don't buy Slack because they get a sales rep from Slack pitching them Slack, right? They buy Slack because they search team messaging tool startups help, right? And then like they find it via SEO or SEM, and like these are consumer marketing strategies being applied to business sales or growth in this case, right? But those first few, the do things that don't scale phase of like, how did Slack get their first? You could go look, how did Slack get their first few customers? Right? That could be an interesting thing to read. I would guess it was like, they went around Silicon Valley and talked to like 1,000 companies, and like 2 of them were like, yeah, we'll try this for $1, and then after that they were able to grow. Maybe don't quote me on that. I have no idea what Slack did, but that's generally what you hear is this 100-for-1 type ratio of like, I don't know how many restaurants you've talked to, but if you talk to the 3 restaurants over here, I can statistically almost guarantee that they're all going to say no to you, right? If you talk to every restaurant in Pittsburgh, I'll be fairly confident that you would get 1 yes for some kind of pilot, right? And it can be frustrating that it almost, like you said, it almost doesn't matter how good your idea or how valuable it seems, right? In those earliest phases, it's a numbers game. You got to find the people who not only see the value, but just fundamentally believe in you and your idea. And those will be the ones that, you can build upon.
And I'll just add to that, once you do find like 1 or 2 or whatever that actually do want to partner with you, try and be as hands-on as possible to make it as successful as possible. Right. If you just say, here's this tool or whatever it is that you offer and say, okay, it'll help you, they probably won't fully adopt it. They won't really implement it. You have to be the one driving their adoption and making sure they're using it, understand how to use it, and are applying it to their business as best they can, so they get as much value as they can, so you can use them as a case study to go to these other restaurants. So try and be as hands-on as possible.
Yeah, basically live at the restaurant at that point. Like, we would